Hello, baby T. Welcome to your room, I hope. It's hard to believe that my last video was mid-August, so there's obviously a lot of catching up to do, and I'm sure the thing you are all wondering about is whether or not COVID did end up affecting whether or not the transfer worked. So obviously there is a lot to catch up on, but the one thing I can say is that the transfer did not take this time, but I don't know if it was COVID or not. Of course, it's likely that COVID played a role because I did get a pretty bad fever, which is not very conducive to pregnancy, especially early pregnancy. But also, the fertility treatment, the medications I was on, I think messed with my thyroid, because one of the reasons I haven't vlogged in so long is because shortly after our trip was over, I started experiencing things like depression, and you would think that obviously depression comes with a failed transfer, but I was able to process it fairly easy. I always knew it was a possibility. I'm grateful that we have another M-baby that we can go back for, and this was more of a low level, just losing interest in things I enjoy depression. And then I had other symptoms like fatigue and joint aches and insomnia. And I was like, okay, is this my ovarian hormones not working right, or is it my thyroid not working right? So the easiest one to check was my thyroid, and it came back abnormal. And at first I was thinking it's probably my thyroid, because when I had COVID, that sends your immune system into high gear, and my hypothyroidism is an autoimmune condition. So, triggered autoimmune condition, my thyroid got worse, probably need more medication. My thyroid got better. The test results showed that I was over medicated. I was not expecting that at all. I also talked to my doctor about starting hormone replacement therapy, which I tried for a bit and it did not go well. I have some details on that, but there is also one other thing that I kind of want to share regarding this whole mess of everything that happened shortly after transfer. So I do get a little ADD in general, which is why I'm going backwards in my story now, but it's also a huge symptom I ended up facing. But so basically, finding out that the transfer failed, I was due for a blood test on a Monday, and I knew that whatever the results were, I would need time to process, and I don't want to have to go to work. I don't want to have to call in. I don't want to have to take a sick day. So the Saturday before, I took a home pregnancy test so that it was late enough that if it was going to be positive, there'd be at least some sort of line on there. And if it was negative, it was negative. And I could just process. Take the weekend to process, go in Monday for the official no, and be done, but have already processed. So I took a home test, and it was as negative can be. Just completely blank, not even a squinty line. And I let myself cry. I grieved what we had lost, put my hope in our next M-baby, and went in for my blood draw. And the blood draw appointment itself went fine. It's welcomed. It was short, sweet, to the point. And so after they drew my blood, they said, okay, you should get results either sometime this evening or tomorrow morning. I was like, all right. sounds good. And they said they'd probably call, which, I mean, any person going into the gynecologist for a blood pregnancy test, you call with those results. Negative, positive, whatever. You call. I did not get a call. I thought maybe I'm just being impatient because they said it could also be tomorrow morning. And that evening I checked the patient portal and it said I had new results. And and it had a message from my doctor. And the message from my doctor said, "Your test results are within normal range. See you at your next appointment." What does normal range mean? Normal range for a 4-week pregnancy, or normal range for someone who's not pregnant? I had to look at the actual numbers to know that I definitely wasn't pregnant. So I was not very happy about that and started looking for another gynecologist. So I found another gynecologist in the area, and it's a clinic that specializes in infertility, but they're not an infertility clinic, so they do like up to IUIs. They'll like help you with certain conditions like PCOS and stuff, but they don't do actual IVF. But I still thought that would be a step up. They might better understand my condition. And they're also going to be a lot more sensitive to, say, going in for a pregnancy test after an embryo transfer. And I felt like I really vibed with the doctor. We discussed trying out hormone replacement therapy because that might work better than the pill. And she started me off on a pretty low dose, which is probably why I was having such a hard time. While my thyroid symptoms improved by lessening the dosage, a couple of times actually, it got like a little bit better, then it got a lot better. But the entire time, I was dealing with like brain fog and trouble focusing and trouble shifting focus when needed. And it did not help that I recently switched positions at work. I switched to an older group of kids. I was learning what their routine was like. I was learning how to work with my new teacher, and it was not going well because my brain just did not want to work. And I think my thyroid health, the biggest thing that changed was coming off of the fertility meds, then going on hormone replacement therapy, then going back on birth control because the hormone replacement therapy wasn't working that well. And I found out in that whole process, just happened to read somewhere, that menopause can enhance the effects of ADHD. Now, I've never been diagnosed with ADHD. Is it possible I have it? Absolutely. But even neurotypical women can experience ADHD-like symptoms going through menopause. And considering that menopause is essentially my diagnosis, suddenly everything made so much sense. It's like, I'm not stupid, I'm just a hormonal mess. My endocrine system doesn't work right, and it's affecting my brain more than I realized. So one of the reasons I went back on birth control instead of just trying a new dose of hormone replacement therapy, two major reasons. One being the cost. Oh my word. I had to pay like $250 for a like 2 to 3 month supply of hormone replacement therapy, and that was ridiculous. And two, I could not guarantee when my cycle would come, and since we were looking to plan a transfer with our second M baby, I need to know exactly when that's coming. So I was like, I'm going back on the pill because I know, stop it, 4 days later, boom, we're good to go. So went back on the pill, and we decided we were going to set aside the first week in February to go to Prague and hopefully get all of our ultrasounds and stuff like that done stateside, so we only have to be there for a short amount of time. But we are also going to save my husband's sample while we're there. One, in case this one doesn't take either, or if we want to make a sibling. It is a lower grade embryo. The one that didn't take was a 5AB, I believe, and the one that we have is a 5BB, but it sounded like it was borderline CC. So not that great, but you never know. It could still work. So I'm cautiously hopeful about it, but we'll see. So yeah, one of the reasons I haven't vlogged is because I have not been doing that well, and have been super stressed with work, trying to adjust to a new work role. I was running into some issues with my co-teacher with communication, and just when that was starting to get a little bit ironed out, there was a situation at work I can't necessarily discuss, but I am currently in charge of the room, which is a full class, still trying to figure out how to make everything work, and I don't have that other teacher as a resource for how to get things to work, how to distribute roles and responsibilities. It's all me and whatever float teacher's in the room. So it's been wild, it's been crazy. Almost everything the past few months has just felt like an absolute blur. My husband has been needing to replace his car for quite some time. He hit a deer and the car was definitely totaled, but it was still street legal. I mean, the headlight casing was completely busted and the hood was dented, but that headlight still worked, the turn signal still worked. The windshield has been cracked for as long as we know. It's rusty, old, yeah, it was in really bad shape. And then the water pump started going out this past fall, and he had to add antifreeze to it like pretty much every single day, which was not ideal, but it gave us some time to go car shopping. But then, on top of the water pump going out, it suddenly died in the middle of the road one day. Got it towed to the mechanic to see if we could squeeze a couple more weeks out of it, because we had just started getting people messaging back saying, when do you want to come test drive? And on top of the water pump going out, the alternator went out. So this car went from a moving pile of junk to just a pile of junk. And we were running around trying to figure out how we were going to get to and from work the next few days, how we were going to get car shopping done. This is also coming up to the weekend of Christmas and a gigantic winter storm. We didn't know how it was all going to work out. The Thursday before Christmas Eve, I ended up getting a ride to work, and it was cold and icy, and roads were kind of scary, and we were open late and closed early. It was a huge mess of weather, but got to work, got back. Thank you very much to my friend who lives down the street that works with me, who was willing to drive me and all of that. And that Friday, since both my husband and I had off work, Christmas Eve, We went car shopping in negative 30-degree weather. That's negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And we test drove a few cars that we had looked at. And Christmas Day, we signed the title. And the Tuesday after Christmas, my husband sold his car to a junk dealer for $150. And I believe it was the Wednesday he was able to get to the Department of Motor Vehicles to officially transfer the title, so we should be getting that in the mail. And his car is now the nicer car. So the other big deal with that is it put a huge dent in our savings account, which luckily I had already bought refundable plane tickets, refundable hotel reservation, but now we got to replenish our savings. Like, we'll be able to go to Prague, get our treatment, but we have a lot of saving to do, especially if the treatment works, because the majority of our savings account was to help with maternity leave and hospital costs and all of that American nonsense. But now it's looking a little slim, but we're still pretty hopeful. And we could probably, at least maybe in May, try again. That was my original plan, but we'll have to see how much savings we get between now and then, because it really put a dent in our savings, but I'm sitting here looking around at our stuff. One of the things you can see a little bit behind me, I decided to put my money where my hope is, and bought a crib. Not new. not that optimistic. A friend of mine, her little boy, who's actually in my class, he is moving onto a big boy bed, and I was the first person she thought of who might want the crib, and she wasn't able to give it up for free. Like, she needed some money back on it, but I looked it up, and that is a like $300 crib. The mattress apparently retails for like $50 to $60. I also got some crib sheets, a waterproof cover, and a crib skirt from her, all for just $150. So I did put some money where my hope is, but I didn't go too crazy about it. So as you can see, got a crib there along with a bunch of my junk, and she's the one who also gave me a handful of stuff in hopes that this will all work. So over here I have Exerciser, a little riding toy, and over here we have a pile of newborn stuff. There's a seat, a little play gym, a bouncy chair. I believe there's also a swing in there that we picked up from downstairs free from a neighbor. I also have somewhere in our piles of junk in here a bottle warmer and a bottle drying mat. So fingers crossed that we get to use those sooner rather than later. But you probably also saw that we have plenty of cleaning to do in here too, because it's a disaster, and this is where all of our junk goes when we don't know what to do with it. So, but here's to what will hopefully be a very fruitful 2023, and hopefully 2023 is the year we get to meet you, baby T. Happy New Year!